Buenos dias, buenas tardes, y buenas noches, bonjour, bonsoir, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be. Jay Slater case. Just a quick video, busy Thursday, but to let you know, excuse me, what I'm planning to do in the next few days is to do a two-part, three-part, four-part, 90-part series, I don't know, on trying to sort out the Saturday, the Sunday, and the Monday of when Jay Slater's body was found and retrieved, and then come up with a theory as to what actually happened on the Saturday, the Sunday, and the Monday. This has been on my mind for a long time, and because we have so many different versions and so many snippets of information, misinformation, and disinformation out there from the people involved, it's a bloody hard job, and that might be the kind of deliberate aim of putting out these different versions. It's a bloody hard job to figure out what actually happened. The first point I want to dig into, just for the purpose of this video, is to question when exactly and how, but let's stick first of all with when exactly the communication was made from Chris Pennington and or Ivor Lovelace to the Guardia Civil to say Jay's body must be down somewhere where I was, if we're talking about Chris Pennington, and I just got out of that man trap, and you need to go in there and find Jay because we know he's in there. And if you don't do that, we will embarrass you the next day by going in ourselves from the beach side and retrieve his body. We've been told this, hand on heart kind of stuff from Ivor Lovelace and Chris Pennington. And yet I can't figure out when that communication actually happens. Apparently on the Saturday. I'll go through this one more time and then we'll see the evidence that shows it can't have happened how we've been told. So on the Saturday, before Jay's body is actually found on the Monday, we're told by Chris, by Ivor, that Chris is down in some kind of, remote part of the ravine. But I think it can only be the first V notch because Chris himself says he only got as far as the first V notch. And then he was trapped and he had to scramble out. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ivor and Chris agree that when Chris, hopefully this rings a bell with you. If not, this is something you need to look into. And then Chris says, yeah, when he was communicating with Ivor that he's in trouble and that he's going to need Guardia Civil choppers to come and help him get out, Ivor is the one, I guess from his basement in Fishguard in Wales, that somehow alerts the Guardia Civil to the severity of this case, and they put into motion a rescue operation to get Chris out. Right? We got it so far. But in the meantime, Chris gets out. And then Chris is saying to Ivor, oh, no, 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 I'm out. Laurel and Hardy stuff here. I'm out there. I'm okay. I'm safe now. It's bloody awful, but I'm out. So now we'd better tell the Guardia Civil that I am out of there. I have survived. But because I know somehow that Jay's body is about 500 meters beyond where I got to, they still need to go in there, not to save me, but to retrieve the body. And additional to that, if they don't go in and do as we say, we will embarrass them and the whole Spanish nation, the whole Spanish government, yeah, by going in the next day from the beach side. Yeah, Chris ain't going to get stuck in there a second time and call the Guardia Civil to rescue him. No, he's going to go in from the beach side and obviously just find the body and retrieve it and, story over, end of. But when does that all happen? I don't get when it can possibly happen. Because we have, and this is where I've posted in a community post today, two videos made by Chris on that Saturday, it's the same day, where Chris is in his car having got himself out of trouble, He's all sweaty, huffing and puffing, of course. Adrian, by the way, is packing a load of stuff in the back of the car. So it's the same day. And there, Chris makes no mention at all of having communicated with the Guardia Civil to say they need to go in there and get Jay and that he's safely out of there. He makes no mention at all that Ivor has had to contact the Guardia Civil to rescue Chris. There is no mention of it at all. So if all of this has happened, Chris is back in his car safe and sound with Adrian about to drive back or get a beer on the way. And Chris doesn't talk about this to us or to anyone. Can we assume that at that point he had not communicated with the Guardia Civil to say Jay's body is in there somewhere and if you don't get him, we'll get him out the next day? He hasn't obviously made that call yet. So he must make that call sometime later in the day. But I was under the impression the call had been made, and it was one and the same call that said, number one, I was in trouble, yes. Thanks for sending in the choppers to rescue me. Number two, I'm out of there. I'm okay. Number three, you still need to go in there because I know Jay's body is somewhere down there further on. And number four, if you don't do all this, we'll embarrass you the next day. I'm under the impression all four messages came from Chris or from Luggy or from both to Guardia Civil as Chris was getting out of there or just after he got out of there. But it apparently seems that Chris was safe and sound out of there in his car, ready to drive home, and he still hasn't communicated that to the Guardia Civil. Otherwise, if he had, he would have told us in that video. So if that call or those calls happened later in the day, what point do they happen? Now, later in the day, when Chris is back home, home sweet home, back in his apartment retreat, he still doesn't mention it. Then he talks about the need for the Guardia Civil to send in specialist teams to find Jay. Now, can I find that quote? Yeah. So not only is there no mention of alerting the Guardia Civil to Jay's location, it's the opposite. Chris is saying, don't know Jay's location, and the only way anyone could find that out and retrieve Jay is to send in a specialist team. At some point in the future, Chris says the only way it could have been done is if the Guardia Civil or Spanish military had brought in a specialist team to go back and search that area. He's saying this on the same day he's supposed to have told the Guardia Civil to go in, specialist team or not, and just get Jay. Yeah, he says, again, on the same day, this is later on the Saturday, when he's supposed to have alerted, the great tip-off, he's supposed to have alerted the Guardia Civil and, I guess, the Coast Guard to what should happen here. Jay's body is there somewhere, you need to retrieve it, otherwise I'll embarrass you. But on that same day, that same evening when he's back home, he says, my belief, and this in the videos where it says, end of operation. He says, my belief is a hiker will have to be saved one day, and only when people go in with a search party will we find Jay. And then he says, one day he'll be found. One day he'll be found. Now, who says hours after they've just got out of the man trap and supposed to have communicated with the Guardia Civil, who actually says one day he'll be found? When hours before you've said, go in there, I know where he is, retrieve the body, and if you don't do it, I'll embarrass you by doing it the next day. These two things don't go together. So the only logical explanation is what we were told in all these videos end up on the Saturday when Jay supposedly, was located and Guardia Civil found him. All of this is happening on the same day. Hours later, when Chris is safely home, he's speculating. No mention of, oh, thank God the Guardia Civil have gone in there, that I got out, and now they're in there retrieving Jay's body. Isn't that good news? No mention of that. It's the opposite. It's, you know, I don't see how Jay's body's going to be found or retrieved until one day, who knows, way in the future, a hiker gets lost and they have to send in, the specialist rescuers. Not adding up at all. So I go back to the question, when was this call, or if there's more than one call, communication? I don't know if it's a call, I don't know if it's an email, I don't know if it's a message, I don't know how. We are not told this. Ivor has all the answers. He knows how this communication with the Guardia Civil went, exactly how it went. Presumably, Chris has the evidence. He's got the actual message. He's got the video he sent to the Guardia Civil. He's got all that. But we're not allowed to see that. Even into year 3, he still won't show us his communication with the Guardia Civil. I mean, he can redact a specific name of the Guardia Civil person he's talking to. He can do whatever he wants. He just needs, I would say, he just needs to show us something that this actually happened. Otherwise, it just doesn't fit. The only thing that makes sense is, for whatever reason, later on in the fullness of time, when Laurel and Hardy are doing these lives and, trying to show us how they did actually find Jay, they had to make all of this up and kind of forgot that it doesn't fit the timeline. It's all very well saying, yeah, Chris got out of the man trap and, Luggy was on the phone to Guardia Civil saying, he's safe, but you send the choppers in anyway because Jay's body's down there. Oh, and by the way, if you don't find him, we'll find him the next day. If you don't do this, here's a threat. It's all very well saying after the fact that happened, but how does it fit in the timeline given we've got the videos of that same Saturday of Chris saying nothing about this? And why does he say nothing about it? I don't see what's wrong with saying, we are the ones that found Jay, in the sense that we knew where he was and we couldn't actually get there. In Chris's case, I could only get to the first V notch, and bloody hell, I'm not going to be the one that sees Jay's dead body. Someone else is going to do that bit. Even though he's also the same person that says, had I gone in the next day to find Jay's body, I would have been fine with it. So again, these two things are both true. Yeah? Luggy protects me in the sense that Luggy said I don't actually have to see and find and retrieve Jay's body, horrific moment that would be. And yet the opposite is also true. Chris is saying, yeah, I'm well up for doing this. Of course I'm happy to find the body of Jay and locate it and record it and retrieve it. I'm going to do all that, no problem at all. Because in that situation, I would be embarrassing the Guardia Civil, and us British lads would come out of it looking glorious. Yeah, we would be heroes. So on the Saturday, no way is Chris going to face the horror of Jay's rotting body there. But if need be on the Sunday, no problem. Watch me do it. These two worlds to sane people can't exist at the same time. It's yet another example of how we are expected to believe both worlds exist. The accident group all do believe that both these worlds exist. They will never explain how. We're just supposed to accept that these two worlds exist. And as Vic said yesterday, we're supposed to be silenced because we express this incredulity that these two worlds can exist together. Now, getting back to my original point, if this is what happened, why have we never been told through mainstream media that this is what happened? You see, I can see two different worlds here too. I can see the world of Chris Pennington and Ivor Lovelace making their videos, making their lives, posting their stuff that they create, which they can always withdraw and deny they ever said or happened. That's one world where they say all this garbage and everyone's nodding along saying, oh, I see. Oh, well done. You did such a good job. But they can ignore that. They can delete it. They can remove it. They can edit it. They can do whatever they want with their own creation. But when it's ITV and when it's Sky TV, then they can't. Their voice, their words, Whatever fabrications they might make on mainstream media can't be withdrawn, can't be amended. It's under the microscope forever. And this is where we see the difference in Chris Pennington's approach. When he knows he can't remove, delete, edit what he says, he's completely different. What did he say to ITV? And listen to the question from ITV. The gal, it's Richard Madeley and his gal there, or his co-presenter. She says, Chris, talk us through that area, meaning the terrain, and your hunt as part of trying to find him. Very, very specific question. Now, of course, Chris is happy to talk about what was the first part of the question? The terrain, yeah, that area. Oh, yeah, he can wax lyrical, even though he only got to the first V notch. He didn't get beyond that. He's got no idea what the Boulder Alley is like. He's got no idea what the second V notch is like. He's got no idea what Juan Lopez Beach is like because he's never been there. So he can't talk about that. But he can talk about the man trap and the short distance he actually went before he was huffing and puffing and scrambling to get out and telling us that Jay never made it to the beach. Yeah, he can do all that. So he does that. He describes for ITV very well the area. What about the second part of the question? Yeah, your part in trying to find him. Well, you would have thought that the most important part of trying to find Jay, if it actually happened, was Chris alerting the Guardia Civil to the fact, the absolute fact, because Chris slices facts, that Jay's body can only be 500 meters beyond where he got stuck. You'd have thought that would be important for ITV and the world to know. That it was Chris's call to the Guardia Civil. Number one, get me out of here. But number two, while you're at it, go find Jay's body, retrieve it. And if you don't, why doesn't he tell ITV this? Why doesn't Chris say to ITV, and I made an indirect threat. You know, I gave that good old Guardia Civil a command. I told them, I know where Jay's body is. You go in and get it, or I'll get it out the next day. Why does he not tell the world this very important part of the story? Especially as ITV have asked him, describe your part in trying to find Jay. Why omit all that? And then a certain time later, when he's controlling how he puts this message out, does he start including it? With Luggy chuckling along in the background saying, yeah, they don't know I hired a boat, didn't I? Yeah, I hired a boat. The boat was already hired to go in there. Why isn't that part of the story mentioned? And the same with Sky TV, with the Sky TV interview when Chris is blabbing away. Yeah, he doesn't mention any of this at all. Yeah, he says, I actually got stuck on Saturday, exhausted from the heat, extremely tired, could not make my way through the ravine. So we couldn't finish our recce the way we would have liked. Well, so what was the way he would have liked? I would have thought the way he would have liked to finish his recce, and we'll talk about a recce later on, because that's no, if he's talking the truth, that's no recce. But let's leave the word recce aside. So we couldn't finish our recce the way we would have liked. Well, I would have thought the way you would have liked your recce to end up is the Guardia Civil going in with helicopters, finding Jay's body and retrieving it. That's what happened. Didn't it, Chris? So if that's not how you wanted your recce to end up, once again, we couldn't finish our recce the way we would have liked. So if the way you would have liked isn't the Guardia Civil finding the body and retrieving it on that Saturday, what is the way you would have liked your recce to have ended? Again, answers we never get from these people because there are no answers. Now, what you'll find after this video that I'm making is that there will be comments aplenty from the accident group. Not one of them will answer any of these questions. They'll be saying probably that, Duncan looks very pale. He needs to get out, stop making videos, get some sunshine. Duncan is recycling the same old thing over and over again. Duncan is this, Duncan is that. No answers to very basic questions. Why is that? They have the answers. Either the answer is because Chris and Luggy are liars, they fabricated a whole story that never happened, That's a valid answer. If Jugglers comes up and says, I think this might be the answer, Chris and Luggy are liars. They had to make something up to make themselves look worthwhile. The whole thing was supposed to be for them to look heroic. They probably got bullied at school and no one liked them and they felt, hey, this will raise my status. I got plenty of money, but no one actually appreciates me. If Jugglers or someone came up with an explanation like that, we'd suddenly think, maybe the accident group do have some thinkers, higher level thinkers. But they won't. They will avoid everything I've just described. They won't try to answer these two different worlds of Ivor and Chris somehow communicating with the Guardia Civil, alerting them that Jay has to be, and then Chris on that very same day not mentioning it to ITV, not mentioning it to Sky TV, not mentioning it apart from in his own live or video where he feels he can say whatever he wants. The accident group are the shysters here. Because, like I say, the likes of Kaz Alice, they have the answers. They know the answer. They communicate with these protagonists. And yet they also hide. They are part of the cover-up. They don't want to deal with uncomfortable truths. And this is why they are so despised. And fingers crossed, this is why, whenever there's a real investigation, they too, I believe, will be called for possible interview, interrogation, or even in the dock. How is it that you knew all this information and yet you refuse to tell anyone about it? This is where I still think we are heading towards a victory of sorts, and this is where I think we need to keep faith and march on. All right, that is the end of part one of what the hell was going on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. There's a lot more to come. I hope you'll bear with me, as in the end, I hope to put together a theory of what I think actually happened on the Saturday, actually happened on the Sunday, and actually happened on the Monday. I'll leave it there. Hasta luego, adios, hasta la vista. See you next time.